All right, chapter 11, being with others, forming relationships in young and middle adulthood. There are four chapter objectives. The first one is relationships, second one is lifestyles, third is family life cycle, and then four is divorce and remarriage. And this is the introduction. Imagine yourself years from now. Your children are grown and have children and grandchildren of their own. In honor of your 80th birthday, they have all come together along with your friends to celebrate. Their present to you is a video created from hundreds of photographs and dozens of videos created over the decades of your life. As you watch it, you realize how lucky you've been to have so many wonderful people in your life. Your relationships have made your adult life fun and worthwhile. As you watch, you wonder what it must be like to go through life totally alone. No family, no friends, even on Facebook, no followers of your Twitter postings. You think of all the wonderful experiences you would have missed in early and middle adulthood, never knowing what friendship is all about, never being in love, never dreaming about children and becoming a parent. That is what we'll explore in this chapter, the ways in which we share our lives with others. First, we consider what makes good friendships and love relationships. Because these relationships form the basis of our lifestyle, we examine the lifestyle influences next. In the third section, we'll consider what it is like to be a parent. Finally, we see what happens when marriages or partnerships end. Throughout this chapter, the emphasis is on aspects of relationships that nearly everyone experiences during young adulthood and middle age. In chapter 12, we examine aspects of relationships specific to middle aged adults. In chapter 14, we do the same for relationships in later life. <clears throat> 11.1 Relationships, Learning Objectives. What type of friends do adults have? How do adult friendships develop? What is love? How does it begin? How does it develop through adulthood? What is the nature of abuse in some relationships? Jamal and Deb, both 25, have been madly in love since they met at a party about a month ago. They spend as much time together as possible and pledge that they will stay together forever. Deb finds herself daydreaming about Jamal at work and can't wait to go over to his apartment. She wants to move in, but her coworkers tell her to slow down. You know what Jamal and Deb are going through? Each of us wants to be wanted by someone else. What would your life be like if you had no one to share it with? There would be no one to go shopping with or hang out with, no one to talk to on the phone, no one to cuddle close to while watching the sunset at a mountain lake. Although there are times when being alone is desirable, for the most part we are social creatures. We need people. Without friends and lovers, life would be pretty lonely. In the next sections, we explore both life-enhancing and life-diminishing relationships. We consider friendships, what happens when love enters the picture, and how people find mates. Unfortunately, some relationships turn violent. We'll also examine the factors underlying aggressive behaviors between partners. Friendships. What is an adult friend? Someone who is there when you need to share, someone not afraid to tell you the truth, someone to have fun with. Friends, of course, are all of these and more. Researchers define friendship as a mutual relationship in which those involved influence one another's behaviors and beliefs, and they define friendship quality as the satisfaction derived from the relationship. The role and influence of friends for young adults is of major importance from the late teens to the mid 20s and continues to be a source of support through adulthood. Friendships are predominantly based on feelings and are grounded in reciprocity and choice. Friendships are different from love relationships in that they are less emotionally intense and involve less sexual energy or contact. Having good friendships helps boost self esteem. They also help us become socialized into new roles throughout adulthood. Friendship in adulthood. From the developmental perspective, adult friendships can be viewed as having identifiable stages: acquaintanceship, build up, continuation, deterioration, and ending. The ABCDE model describes not only the stages of friendships but also the process by which they change. For example, whether a friendship will develop from acquaintanceship to build up depends on several factors that include the basis of the attraction, what each person knows about the other, how good the communication is between the partners, the perceived importance of the friendship, and so on. Although many friendships reach the deterioration stage, whether a friendship ultimately ends depends importantly on the availability of alternative relationships. If new potential friends appear, old friendships may end. If not, they may continue even though they may no longer be considered important by either person. Longitudinal research shows how friendships change from adolescence through young adulthood, sometimes in ways that are predictable and sometimes not. For example, as you probably have experienced, life transitions, for example, going away to college, getting married, usually result in fewer friends and less contact with friends you keep. People tend to have more friends and acquaintances during young adulthood than at any subsequent period. Friendships are important throughout adulthood, in part because a person's life satisfaction is strongly related to the quality and quantity of contacts with friends. College students who have strong friendship networks adjust better to stressful life events and have better self esteem. The importance of maintaining contacts with friends cuts across ethnic lines as well. Additionally, people who have friendships that cross ethnic groups have more positive attitudes towards people with different backgrounds. Thus, regardless of one's background, friendships play a major role in determining how much we enjoy life. Researchers have uncovered three broad themes that underlie adult friendships. 1. The most frequently mentioned dimension represents the affective or emotional basis of friendship. This dimension refers to self disclosure and expressions of intimacy, appreciation, affection, and support, all of which are based on trust, loyalty, and commitment. 2. The second theme reflects the shared or communal nature of friendship, in which friends participate in or support activities of mutual interest. 3. The third dimension represents sociability and compatibility. Our friends keep us entertained and are sources of amusement, fun, and recreation. These three dimensions are found in friendships among adults of all ages. They characterize both traditional, for example, face to face, and new, for example, online forms of friendships. The development of online social networks such as Facebook raised concerns among social commentators that adult social friendship networks would decline in quality because in depth interactions would be replaced with quick emails or postings. Research shows that this concern has no basis. Wang and Wellman examined friendship networks in adults aged 25 and 74. They documented that the quality of the friendship network was good overall, actually improving between 2002 and 2007. Most important, this improvement was documented whether people were non users of the internet or heavily virtual. In fact, they found that heavy internet users had the most friends, both online and offline. In the case of online friendships, trust is an important factor because visual cues may not be present to verify the information being presented. Online environments are more conducive to people who are shy, allowing opportunities to meet others in an initially more anonymous setting in which social interaction and intimacy levels can be carefully controlled. This relative anonymity provides a supportive context for the subsequent development of online friendships. Online connections can facilitate strong commitment between friends. Research shows that most adults who have online committed friendships report that they can get stronger and also report that such friendships go through the same cycles as traditional face to face friendships. A special type of friendship exists with one's siblings. Although little research has focused on the development and maintenance of sibling friendships across adulthood, we know that sibling relationships play an important role in young adulthood and that the importance of the relationships varies with age. As you can see in figure 11.1, women place more importance on sibling ties across adulthood than do men. However, for both genders, the strength of such ties is greatest in adolescence and late life. In young adulthood, siblings report that geographic distance does not affect the quality of the relationship. Expressions of intimacy about the importance of the relationship really matter. And there are many kinds of relationships created between siblings that tend to change over time. We will consider sibling relationships in more detail in chapter 15. Men Men's, women's, and cross sex friendships. Men's and women's friendships tend to differ in adulthood, reflecting continuity in the learned behaviors from childhood. Women tend to base their friendships on more intimate and emotional sharing and use friendship as a means to confide in others. For women, getting together with friends often takes the form of getting together to discuss personal matters. Confiding in others is a basis of women's friendships. In contrast, men tend to base friendships on shared activities or interests. They are more likely to go bowling or fishing or talk about sports with their friends. For men, friendships are often but not always less intimate. Although men often use shared activities rather than shared confidences as the basis for friendships, men rather than men do tend to have a smaller number of friends with whom they have a close personal friendship and with whom they share intimate information and feelings. Women tend to have more close relationships than do men. Although you may think this puts women at an advantage, research shows that this is not always the case. Sometimes friends can get on people's nerves or make demands. When these things happen, women tend to be less happy even when they have lots of friends. Why are women's friendships typically more intimate than men's? Compared to men, women have much more experience with such intimate sharing from early childhood, and they are more comfortable with vulnerability. Social pressure on men to be brave and strong and actually inhibit their ability to form friendships. What about friendships between men and women? These friendships have a beneficial effect, especially for men. Cross sex friendships tend to help men have lower levels of dating anxiety and higher capacity for intimacy. It is interesting, however, that such benefits are not evident for women. These patterns hold across ethnic groups too. But cross sex friendships can also prove troublesome as a result of misperceptions and pressure against them from third parties, for example, spouses and partners, and organizations. For example, companies may discourage such friendships. Some research shows that men tend to over perceive and women tend to under perceive their friends' sexual interest in them. Maintaining cross sex friendships once individuals enter into exclusive dating relationships, marriage, or committed relationships is very difficult, and it often results in one partner feeling jealous. Love relationships. Love is one of those things everybody feels but nobody can define completely. One way researchers have tried to understand love is to think about what components are essential. In an interesting series of studies, Sternberg found that love has three basic components. One, passion, an intense physiological desire for someone. Two, intimacy, feeling that one can share all one's thoughts and actions with another. Three, commitment, the willingness to stay with a person through good and bad times. Ideally, a true love relationship has all three components. When couples have equivalent amounts of love and types of love, they tend to be happier. As we will see next, the balance among these components often shifts as time passes. Love through adulthood. The different combinations of love can be used to understand how relationships develop. Research shows that the development of romantic relationships is a complex process influenced by relationships in childhood and adolescence. Early in a romantic relationship, passion is usually high, whereas intimacy and commitment tend to be low. This infatuation, an intense physically based relationship in which the two people have a high risk of misunderstanding and jealousy. But infatuation is short lived, whereas even the smallest touch is enough to drive each partner into wild, lustful ecstasy in the beginning. With time, it takes more and more effort to get the same level of feeling. As passion fades, either a relationship acquires emotional intimacy or it is likely to end. Trust, honesty, openness, and acceptance must be part of any strong relationship. When they are present, romantic love develops. Although it may not be the stuff of romance novels, this passion is a good thing. Research shows that people who select a partner for a more permanent relationship, for example, marriage, during the height of the infatuation, are likely to support the idea that, quote, love is blind. Those couples are more likely to divorce. But if the couple gives it more time and works at their relationship, they may become committed to each other. By spending much of their time together, making decisions together, caring for each other, sharing possessions, and developing ways to settle conflicts, they increase the chances that their relationship will last. Such couples usually show outward signs of commitment, such as wearing a lover's ring, having children together, or simply sharing the mundane details of daily life, from making toast at breakfast to before bed rituals. Lemieux and Hale demonstrated that these developmental trends hold in romantically involved couples between 17 and 75 years of age. As the length of the relationship increases, intimacy and passion decrease, but commitment increases. Falling in love. Everybody wants to be loved by somebody, but actually having it happen is fraught with difficulties. In his book, The Prophet, Khalil Gibran points out that love is two sided. Just as it can give you great ecstasy, so can it cause you great pain. Yet most of us are willing to take the risk. As you may have experienced, taking the risk is fun at times and difficult at other times. Making a connection can be ritualized, as when people use pickup lines in a bar, or it can happen almost by accident, as when two people literally run into each other in a crowded corridor. The question that confronts us is, how do people fall in love? Do birds of a feather flock together, or do opposites attract? The best explanation of the process is the theory of assortative matching, which states that people find partners based on their similarity to each other. Assortative matching occurs along many dimensions, including education, religious beliefs, physical traits, age, socioeconomic status, intelligence, and political ideology, among others. Such non random mating occurs most often in Western societies, which allow people to have more control over their own dating and pairing behavior. Common activities are one basis for identifying potential mates, except that is, in speed dating situations. In that case, when people have very limited time to explore potentially common interests, it comes down to physical attractiveness. Does commonality tend to result in happier relationships? The research findings are mixed. Jenkins found that couples higher in marital satisfaction were similar in terms of their openness to experience, but not on other aspects of personality. However, a study of 12,000 Dutch couples showed that healthy people tended to be in relationships with other healthy people, and that unhealthy people tended to be in relationships with other unhealthy people. These results may be due to couples' similar levels of education, which were related to shared circumstances. People meet people in all sorts of places. Does where people meet influence the likelihood that they will click on a particular dimension and will form a couple? Cal Minj and Flap found that it did. Using data from more than 1,500 couples, they found that meeting at school was most likely to result in the most forms of homogamy, the degree to which people are similar. Although meeting through other methods, being from the same neighborhood or through family networks, could promote homogamy, the odds are that they do not promote most forms of homogamy other than religious. Not surprisingly, the pool of available people to meet is strongly shaped by the opportunities available, which in turn constrain the types of people one is likely to meet. Speed dating, a relatively new addition to the world of dating, provides a way to meet several people in a short period of time. Speed dating is practiced most by young adults. The rules governing partner selection during speed dating sessions seem quite similar to traditional dating. Physically attractive people, outgoing and self-assured people, and moderately self-focused people are selected more often, and their dates are rated as smoother. The advent of online dating makes it possible for adults who have social or dating anxiety to meet people nonetheless. But it is not the only the socially anxious who are meeting this way. Surveys indicate that nearly 1 in every 5 couples in the United States meet online, compared with 1 in 10 in Australia and 1 in 20 in Spain and the United Kingdom. Not surprisingly, people who meet online tend to be young and middle-aged adults, with slightly stronger preference among middle-aged adults for online as opposed to speed dating. Emerging research indicates that virtual dating sites offer both problems and possibilities. On the one hand, research note that the component of member profiles may be suspect. On the other hand, many couples have met and formed committed relationships via online sites. In the online world, initial decisions whether to pursue a potential mate work similarly to the offline world. First impressions are driven mainly by the perceived attractiveness of the person's photograph, whereas more deliberate decisions are influenced by both perceived attractiveness and such self described attributes as ambition. We've seen that physical attractiveness matters in speed dating and online dating as it does in traditional dating. How does physical attraction operate? Research shows that women tend to choose more masculine looking man as a person with whom to have an exciting short term relationship, but tend to select a more feminine looking man for their husband or as the type of man their parents would want them to date. These findings support a study of nearly 2,000 Spanish respondents, which showed that physical attractiveness is not only important in sporadic relationships, but also influences the way in which people fall in love. Such attractiveness is linked to feelings and thoughts associated with love, intimacy, passion, and commitment, and to satisfaction with the relationship. How do these couple forming behaviors compare cross culturally? A few studies have examined the factors that attract people to each other in different cultures. In one now classic study, Buss and a large team of researchers identified the effects of culture and gender on heterosexual mate preferences in 37 cultures worldwide. Men and women in each culture displayed unique orderings of their preferences concerning the ideal characteristics of a mate. When all the orderings and preferences were compared, two main dimensions emerged. In the first main dimension, the characteristics of a desirable mate changed because of the cultural values. That is, whether the respondent's country has more traditional values or Western industrialized values. In traditional cultures, men place a high value on a woman's chastity, desire for home and children, and being a good cook and housekeeper. Women place high value on a man's ambition and industry, being a good financial prospect and holding favorable social status. In China, India, Iran, and Nigeria represent the traditional end of the dimension. In contrast, people in Western industrialized cultures value these qualities to a much lesser extent. The Netherlands, Great Britain, Finland, and Sweden represent this end of the dimension. People in these countries place more value on Western ideals. The second main dimension reflects the relative importance of education, intelligence, and social refinement. As opposed to a pleasing disposition in choosing a mate. For example, people in Spain, Colombia, and Greece highly value education, intelligence, and social refinement. In contrast, people in Indonesia place a greater emphasis on having a pleasing disposition. Note that this dimension emphasizes the same traits for both men and women. Chastity proved to be the characteristic showing the most variability across cultures, being highly desired in some cultures but mattering little in others. It is interesting that in their respective search for mates, men around the world value physical attractiveness in women, whereas women around the world look for men capable of being good providers. But men and women around the world agree that love and mutual attraction are most important, and nearly all cultures rate dependability, emotional stability, kindness, and understanding as important factors. Attraction, it seems, has some characteristics that transcend culture. Overall, Buss and his colleagues concluded that mate selection is a complex process no matter where you live. However, each culture has a describable set of high priority traits that men and women look for in the perfect mate. The study also shows that socialization within a culture plays a key role in being attractive to the opposite sex. Characteristics that are highly desirable in one culture may not be desirable in another. In the Spotlight on Research, Schmidt and his team of colleagues had 1,700 and 804 participants from 62 cultural regions complete the Relationship Questionnaire, or RQ, a self-report measure of adult romantic attachment. They showed that secure romantic attachment was the norm in nearly 80% of cultures, and that preoccupied romantic attachment was particularly common in East Asian cultures. In general, what these large multicultural studies show is that there are global patterns in mate selection and romantic relationships. The romantic attachment profiles of individual nations were correlated with sociocultural indicators in ways that supported evolutionary theories of romantic attachment and basic human mating strategies. Culture is a very powerful force in shaping mate selection choices. For example, despite decades of socio-political change in China, the socialist transformation in the 1950s, and the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, and the economic reforms in the 1990s, research indicates that the same status hierarchy norms govern mating patterns in urban China. Emotional investment in a romantic relationship also varies by culture. Specifically, across 48 different cultures globally, people from cultures that have good health care, education, and resources, and that permit young adults to choose their own mates, tend to develop more secure romantic attachments than do people from cultures that do not have these characteristics. Clearly, cultural norms are sometimes highly resistant to change. Arranged marriages are a major way that some cultures ensure an appropriate match on key dimensions. For example, loyalty of the individual to the family is a very important value in India. So, despite many changes in mate selection, about 95% of marriages in India are carefully arranged to ensure that an appropriate mate is selected. Data show that this approach appears to work. Among urban professionals polled in one study, 81% said their marriages had been arranged, and 94% of them rated their marriage as, quote, very successful. Similarly, Islamic societies use matching as a way to preserve family consistency and continuity, and tend to ensure that couples follow the prohibition on premarital relationships between men and women. Matchmaking in these societies occurs both through family connections and personal advertisements in newspapers. To keep up with the internet age, Muslim matchmaking has gone online too. Developmental forces and relationships. As you no doubt know from your own experience, finding a suitable relationship is really tough. Many things must work just right. Timing, meeting the right person, luck, and effort are but a few of the factors that shape the course of a relationship. Centuries of romance stories describe this magical process and portray it as one of life's greatest mysteries. From our discussion here, you know that who chooses whom and whether the feelings will be mutual results from the interaction of developmental forces described in the biopsychosocial model presented in Chapter 1. Recent neuroscience research is also demystifying love relationships. Let's see how. Love is one of the three discrete interrelated emotional systems. The sex drive and attachment are the other two. The brain circuitry involved in romantic love, maternal love, and long term attachment overlap. In terms of love, neurochemicals related to the amphetamines come into play early in the process, providing a biological explanation for the exhilaration of falling madly in love. Aaron and colleagues reported that couples who were in the early stages of romantic love showed high levels of activity in the dopamine system, which is involved in all of the basic biological drives. Once the relationship settles into what some people might call long term commitment and tranquility, the brain processes switch neurochemically to substances related to morphine, a powerful narcotic. People with a predilection to fall in love also tend to show left hemisphere chemical dominance and several changes in neurochemical processing. Additional research indicates that the hormone oxytocin may play an important role in attachment and women's orgasms, among other things, which has earned it the nickname of the cuddle hormone. Love really does a number on your brain. And that's not all. It also turns out that the interactions among psychological aspects, neurological aspects, and hormonal aspects of romantic love help explain why couples tend to have exclusive relationships with each other. For women, the stronger the romantic bond with the boyfriend, the less likely they are to be able to identify the body odor of a different male friend. That means that women's attention is deflected from other potential male partners the more they are romantically involved with one specific male. Psychologically, as we saw in Chapter 9, an important developmental issue is intimacy. According to Erickson, mature relationships are impossible without it. Additionally, the kinds of relationships you saw and experienced as a child and whether they involved violence affect how you define and act in relationships you develop as an adult. Sociocultural forces shape the characteristics you find desirable in a mate and determine whether you are likely to encounter resistance from your family when you have made your choice. Life cycle forces matter too. Different aspects of love are more or less important depending on your stage in life. For example, romantic love tends to be most prominent in young adulthood, whereas the aspect of companionship becomes more important later in life. In short, to understand adult relationships, we must take the forces of the biopsychosocial model into account. Relying too heavily on one or two forces provides an incomplete description of why people are successful or not in finding a partner or a friend. Fortunately, the developmental forces do not influence only good relationships. Unfortunately, rather, as we will see next, sometimes relationships turn violent. The dark side of relationships, abuse. Up to this point, we have been considering relationships that are healthy and positive. Sadly, this is not always the case. Sometimes relationships become violent. One person becomes aggressive towards another partner, creating an abusive relationship. Such relationships have received increasing attention since the early 1980s when the U.S. criminal justice system ruled that under some circumstances, abusive relationships can be used as an explanation for one's behavior. For example, battered woman syndrome occurs when a woman believes that she cannot leave the abusive situation and may even go as far as to kill her abuser. Many college students report experiencing abuse in a dating relationship. A national representative sample of more than 4,100 respondents revealed that 40% of them had experienced victimization by young adulthood. Being female, Latina, African American, having an atypical family structure, something other than two biological parents, having more romantic partners, early onset of sexual activity, and being the victim of child abuse predicted victimization. Although overall national rates of sexual assault have declined more than 60% since the early 1990s, acquaintance rape or date rape is still a major problem. College women are 4 times more likely to be the victim of sexual assault than are women in other age groups. What range of aggressive behavior occurs in abusive relationships? What causes such abuse? Researchers are finding answers to these and related questions. Based on considerable research on abusive partners, O'Leary argues that there is a continuum of aggressive behaviors toward a partner, which progresses as follows: verbally aggressive behaviors, physically aggressive behaviors, severe physically aggressive behaviors, and murder. The causes of the abuse also vary with the type of abusive behavior being expressed. 2 points about the continuum should be noted. First, there may be a fundamental differences in the types of aggression independent of the level of severity. Overall, each year, about 4.8 million women and 2.9 million men experience partner related physical assaults and rape in the United States. Worldwide, between 10 and 69% of women report being physically assaulted or raped. The second interesting point depicted in the table is the suspected underlying causes of aggressive behavior differ as the type of aggressive behavior changes. Although anger and hostility in the perpetrator are associated with various forms of physical abuse, the exact nature of this relationship remains elusive. As can be seen in the table, the number of suspected causes of aggressive behavior increases as the level of aggression increases. Thus, the cause the causes of aggressive behavior become more complex as the level of aggression worsens. Such differences in cause imply that the most effective way to intervene with abusers is to approach each one individually and not try to apply a one size fits all model. Men are also the victims of violence from intimate partners, though the rate about 1/3 of that of women. Studies in New Zealand and the United States revealed that both men and women showed similar patterns of holding traditional gendered beliefs and lacking communication and anger management skills. However, intervention programs tend to focus on male perpetrators. Research on violence in gay and lesbian relationships reveals similar findings. Patterns of violence among gay and lesbian couples are roughly equivalent to that shown by heterosexual couples. The reasons for abuse include dissatisfaction with the relationship and alcohol abuse. Culture is also an important contextual factor in understanding partner abuse. In particular, violence against women worldwide reflects cultural traditions, beliefs, and values of patriarchal societies. This can be seen in the commonplace violent practices against women, which include sexual slavery, female genital cutting, intimate partner violence, and honor killing. For example, cultures that emphasize honor, that portray females as passive, nurturing supporters of men's activities, and that emphasize loyalty and sacrifice for the family may contribute to the tolerance of abuse. Vandeo reported 2 studies of Latino Americans, European Americans who live in the southern part of the United States, and European Americans who live in the northern part of the United States that examine these ideas. Latino Americans and European Americans who live in the southern part of the United States place more value on honor. These groups rated women in an abusive relationship more positively if she stayed with a man. They also communicated less disapproval of a woman whom they witnessed being shoved and restrained if she portrayed herself as contrite and self blaming than did the European Americans who lived in the northern part of the United States, who rated the woman more positively if she left the man. Research on Mexican women who were victims of partner abuse confirmed that even when they are willing to seek help, they nevertheless still follow cultural dictates to cope. Chinese Americans are more likely to define domestic violence in terms of physical and sexual aggression and not include psychological forms of abuse. And South Asian immigrants to the United States report the use of social isolation, for example, not being able to interact with family, friends, and coworkers, as a painful form of abuse that is often tied to financial dependence on the husband and traditional culture gender roles. Additionally, international data indicate that the rates are higher in cultures that emphasize female purity, male status, and family honor. For example, a common cause of women's murders in Arab countries is brothers or other male relatives killing the victim because she violated the family's honor. Intimate partner violence is prevalent in China, 43% lifetime risk in one study, and has strong associations with male patriarchal values and conflict resolutions. Alarmed by the seriousness of abuse, many communities have established shelters for battered women and their children, as well as programs to treat abusive men. However, the legal system in many localities is still not set up to deal with domestic violence. Women in some locations cannot sue their husbands for assault, and restraining orders all too often offer little real protection from additional violence. Much remains to be done to protect women and their children from the fear and the reality of continued abuse. 11.2 Lifestyles, Learning Objectives. Why do some people decide not to marry, and what are these people like? What are the characteristics of cohabiting people? What are gay and lesbian relationships like? What is marriage like through the course of adulthood? Kevin and Beth are on cloud nine. They got married 1 month ago and have recently returned from their honeymoon. Everyone who sees them can tell they love each other a lot. They are highly compatible and have much in common, sharing most of their leisure activities. Kevin and Beth wonder what lies ahead in their marriage. Developing relationships is only part of the picture in understanding how adults live and their lives with other people. Putting relationships like Kevin and Beth's in context is important for us to understand how relationships come into existence and how they change over time. In the following sections, we explore relationship lifestyles, singlehood, cohabitation, gay and lesbian couples, and marriage. Singlehood. When Susan graduated from college with her degree in accounting, she took a job at a consulting firm. For the first several years in her job, she spent more time traveling than she did at home. During this time, she had a series of love relationships, but none resulted in commitment, even though she had marriage as a goal. By the time she was in her mid 30s, Susan decided that she no longer wanted to get married. I'm now a partner in my firm. I enjoy traveling, and I'm pretty flexible in terms of moving if something better comes along, she stated to her friend Michelle. But I do miss being with someone to share my day or to just hang out with. Like Susan, most men and women during early adulthood are single, defined as not living with an intimate partner. Estimates are that approximately 80% of men and 70% of women between the ages of 20 and 24 are unmarried, with increasing numbers deciding to stay that way. What it's What's it like to be single in the United States? It's tougher than you might think. DePaulo points out numerous stereotypes and biases against single people. Her research found that young adults characterize married people as caring, kind, and giving about 50% of the time, compared with only 2% for single people. And single people receive less compensation at work than married people do, even when age and experience are equivalent. DePaulo also found that rental agents preferred married couples 60% of the time. Can you think of reasons why people might hold these biases against single people? Many women and men remain single as young adults to focus on establishing their careers rather than marriage or relationships, which most do later. Others report that they simply did not meet the quote right person or prefer singlehood. However, the pressure to marry is especially strong for women. Frequent questions such as, quote, any good prospects yet, may leave women feeling conspicuous or left out as many of their friends marry. Men tend to remain single longer in young adulthood because they tend to marry at a later age than women. Fewer men than women remain unmarried throughout adulthood, though mainly because men find partners more easily as they select from a larger age range of unmarried women. Ethnic differences in singlehood reflect differences in age at marriage as well as social factors. For example, nearly twice as many African Americans are single during young adulthood as European Americans, and more are choosing to remain so. Professional African American women show no significant differences when from partnered African American women in well-being. Singlehood is also increasing among Latinos, in part because the average age of Latinos in the United States is lower than other ethnic groups, and in part because of poor economic opportunities for many Latinos. However, Latino men expect to marry, even if they do not, because it indicates achievement. Globally, the meanings and implications of remaining single are often tied to strongly held cultural and religious beliefs. For example, Muslim women who remain single in Malaysia speak in terms of jodoh, the soulmate one finds through fate at a time appointed by God, as a reason. They believe that God simply has not decided to have them meet their mate at this time. But because the role of Malaysian women is to marry, they also understand their marginalized position in society through their singlehood. In Southeast Asia, the number of single adults has increased steadily as education levels have risen over the past several decades. However, family systems in these cultures have not yet adapted to these changing lifestyle patterns. An important distinction is between adults who are temporarily single, for example, those who are single only until they find a suitable marriage partner, and those who choose to remain single. Results from an in-depth interview study with never married women in their 30s revealed three distinct groups. Some suffer with acute distress about being single and long to be married with children. Others describe experiencing an emotional continuum of desiring to be married and desiring to remain single. And others say that they are quite happy with a healthy self image and high quality of life. For most singles, the decision to never marry is a gradual one. This transition is represented by the change in self-attributed status that occurs over time and is associated with a cultural timetable for marriage. It marks the experience of, quote, becoming single that occurs when an individual identifies more with singlehood than with marriage. Still, a key question is what prompts people to decide that they will remain single? For some, it is reaching a milestone birthday, for example, 40, and still being single, although the particular age chosen varies a great deal. For many middle aged single women, purchasing a house marks the decision. I always thought you got married, you bought a. I always thought you got married, you bought a house. Well, I bought a house and I'm not married. I've laid down roots. You're sort of saying, okay, this is it, and it makes you feel more settled. For most, though, the transition to permanent singlehood is a gradual one they drift into by circumstance rather than lifestyle they chose, such as having to care for parents or other family members instead of attending to personal goals related to marriage, family, education, or career. By the time they reach age 40, never married women have defined family as their family of origin and friendships, and most are content with their lives. Cohabitation. Being unmarried does not necessarily mean living alone. People in committed, intimate sexual relationships but who are not married may decide that living together or cohabitation provides a way to share daily life. Cohabitation is becoming an increasingly popular lifestyle choice in the United States as well as in Canada, Europe, Australia, and elsewhere, and is considered a growing hallmark of emerging adulthood. As you can see in figure 11.3, cohabitation in the United States has increased tenfold over the last 3 decades, from 523,000 in 1970 to 5.5 million in 2002. The most recent year extensive data were collected. People with lower educational levels cohabit more and do so in more relationships than individuals with higher education levels. European American, African American, and Latino men and women cohabit at about the same rates, other factors being equal. Couples cohabit for three main reasons, most often in connection with testing their relationship in the context of potential marriage. Some couples cohabit for reasons of convenience, such as sharing expenses and sexual accessibility. There is typically no long term commitment for these couples, and marriage is not usually a goal. Women tend to report convenience as a factor more so than men. Most American young adult couples, though, cohabit as a step towards marriage. In fact, about half of cohabiting couples transition to marriage. In this case, the couple is actually engaging in a trial marriage. If marriage does not follow, the couple usually separates. Finally, some couples use cohabitation instead of marriage. The global picture differs by culture. For example, in most European, South American, and Caribbean countries, cohabitation is a common alternative to marriage for young adults. Cohabitation is extremely common in the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, where this lifestyle is part of the culture. 99% of married couples in Sweden lived together before they married, and nearly 1 in 4 couples are not legally married. Decisions to marry in these countries are typically made to legalize the relationship after children are born, in contrast to Americans who marry to confirm their love and commitment to each other. Interestingly, having cohabitated does not seem to make marriages any better. In fact, it may do more harm than good, resulting in lower quality marriages. These findings reflect two underlying issues. Couples who have children while cohabiting, especially for European American women as compared with African American and Latina women, and couples who are using cohabitation to test their relationship are most likely to report subsequent problems. Young adults whose parents divorced are more likely to cohabit, but this effect weakens between the late teens and early 30s. Are there differences between couples who cohabit and couples who marry right away? Longitudinal studies find few differences in couples' behavior after living together for many years, regardless of whether they married without cohabiting, cohabited then married, or simply cohabited. No differences are reported in relationships between parents and adult children of married versus cohabited couples. Additionally, many countries extend the same rights and benefits to cohabiting couples as they do to married couples and have done so for many years. For instance, Argentina provides pension rights to cohabiting partners, Canada extends insurance benefits, and Australia has laws governing the disposition of property when cohabiting couples sever the relationship. Gay and lesbian couples. Less is known about the developmental course of gay and lesbian relationships than heterosexual relationships, largely because they have historically not been the focus of research. To date, gay and lesbian couples or relationships have been studied most often in comparison to married heterosexual couples. What is it like to be in a gay or lesbian relationship? One woman shares her experience in the Real People feature. Like heterosexuals, gay and lesbian couples must deal with issues related to effective communication, power, and household responsibilities. For the most part, the relationships of gay and lesbian couples have many similarities to those of heterosexual couples. Most gay and lesbian couples are in dual earner relationships, much like the majority of married heterosexual couples, and are likely to share household chores. However, gay and lesbian couples do differ from heterosexual couples in the degree to which both partners are similar on demographic characteristics such as race, age, and education. Gay and lesbian couples tend to be more dissimilar. In general, though, the same factors predict long term success for couples regardless of sexual orientation. Gender differences play more of a role in determining relationship styles than do differences in sexual orientation. Gay men, like heterosexual men, tend to separate love and sex and have more short term relationships. Both lesbian and heterosexual women are more likely to connect sex and emotional intimacy in fewer, longer lasting relationships. Lesbians tend to make a commitment and cohabit faster than heterosexual couples. Men in any type of relationship tend to want more power if they earn more money. Women in any type of relationship are likely to be more egalitarian and view money as a way to maintain independence from one's partner. Gay and lesbian couples report receiving less support from family members than do their married or cohabiting couples. The more that one's family holds traditional ethnic and religious values, the less likely it is that the family will provide support. At a societal level, marriage or civil unions between same-sex couples remains highly controversial in America, with several states passing constitutional amendments or statutes defining marriage as between a man and a woman. The federal government also, since passage of the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, in 1996, defines marriage as between one man and one woman. The lack of legal recognition for gay and lesbian relationships in the United States also means that certain rights and privileges, such as marriage, certain insurance benefits, and hospital visitation rights, are not always granted. For example, it is difficult for gay and lesbian partners to inherit property from their partners in the absence of a will, and sometimes they are denied visitation rights when their partner is hospitalized. Although the legal status of gay and lesbian couples is changing in more countries, most notably in Scandinavia, and a few states in the United States, including New York, most countries and states in the United States do not provide them with the same legal rights as married couples. Marriage. Most adults want their love relationships to result in marriage. However, U.S. residents are in less of a hurry to achieve this goal. The median age at first marriage for adults in the United States has been rising for several decades. As you can see in the figure, between 1970 and 2009, the median age for first marriage rose nearly 4 years for both men and women, from roughly 23 to 28 for men, and from roughly 21 to 25 for women. This trend has some benefits in that, for women anyway, marrying at a later age lessens the likelihood of divorce. Women under age 20 at the time they are first married are 3 times more likely to end up divorced than women who marry in their 20s, and 6 times more likely to end up in divorce than first-time wives in their 30s. Let's explore age and other factors that keep marriages going strong over time. What is a successful marriage and what predicts it? You undoubtedly know couples who appear to have a very successful marriage, but what does that mean, really? Is success in marriage defined as subjective happiness and commitment, personal fulfillment, or simply the fact that the couple is still married? Menot differentiates marriage success, which is an umbrella term referring to any marital outcomes such as divorce rates. Marital quality, which is a subjective evaluation of the couple's relationship on a number of different dimensions. Marital adjustment, the degree to which a husband and wife accommodate to each other over a certain period of time. And marital satisfaction, which is a global assessment of one's marriage. Each of these provides a unique insight into the workings of a marriage. At a general level, why do some marriages succeed? Part of it has to do with what people believe about marriage and what makes marriage succeed, and what makes a marriage succeed. Answering the questions in the table will provide you with some good insights. Take time to think about your responses and why you answered the way you did. Your responses are the result of many factors, including the socialization you had about marriage. As we explore the research data about marital success, think about these and other widely held beliefs about marriage. Marriages, like other relationships, differ from one another, but some important predictors of future success can be identified. One key factor is enduring marriages. In enduring marriages is the relative maturity of the two partners at the time they are married. In general, the younger the partners are, the lower the odds that the marriage will last, especially when people are in their teens or early 20s. In part, the age issue relates to Erikson's belief that intimacy cannot be achieved until after one's identity is established. Other reasons that increase or decrease the likelihood that marriage will last include financial security and pregnancy at the time of marriage. A second important predictor of successful marriage is homogamy, or the similarity of values and interests a couple shares. As we saw in relation to choosing a mate, the extent at that the partners share similar age, values, goals, attitudes, especially the desire for children, socioeconomic status, certain behaviors such as drinking alcohol, and ethnic background increases the likelihood that their relationship will succeed. A third factor in predicting marital success is a feeling that the relationship is equal. According to the exchange theory, marriage is based on each partner's contributing something to the relationship that the other would be hard pressed to provide. Satisfying and happy marriages result when both partners perceive that there is a fair exchange or equity in all dimensions of the relationship. Problems achieving such equity can arise because of the competing demands of work and family, an issue we take up again in Chapter 12. Cross cultural research supports these factors. Couples in the United States and Iran say that trust, consulting each other, honesty, making joint decisions, and commitment make the difference between a successful marriage and an unsuccessful marriage. Couples for whom religion is important also point to commonly held faith. Do married couples stay happy? Few sites are happier than a couple on their wedding day. Newlyweds like Kevin and Beth in the vignette are at the peak of marital bliss. The beliefs people bring into a marriage influence how satisfied they will be as the marriage develops. But as you may have experienced, feelings change over time, sometimes getting better and stronger, sometimes not. Research shows that for most couples, overall marital satisfaction is highest at the beginning of the marriage and falls until the children begin leaving home and raises again in later life. This pattern holds for both married and never married cohabiting couples with children. However, for some couples, satisfaction never rebounds and remains low. In essence, they have become emotionally divorced. Overall, marital satisfaction ebbs and flows over time. The pattern of a particular marriage over the years is determined by the nature of the dependence of each spouse on each other. When dependence is mutual and about equal, and both people hold similar values that form the basis of their commitment to each other, the marriage is strong and close. When the dependence is one partner is much higher than that of the other, however, the marriage is likely to be characterized by stress and conflict. Changes in individual lives over adulthood shift the balance of dependence from one partner to the other. For example, one partner may go back to school, become ill, or lose status. Learning how to deal with these changes is the secret to long and happy marriages. The fact that marital satisfaction has generated downward trend but varies widely across couples led Carney and Brodbury to propose a vulnerability stress adaptation model of marriage depicted in the figure. The vulnerability stress adaptation model sees marital quality as a dynamic process resulting from the couple's ability to handle stressful events in the context of their particular vulnerabilities and resources. For example, a couple's ability to adapt to stressful situations gets better over time. The quality of the marriage probably will improve. How well couples adapt to various stresses on the relationship determines whether the marriage continues or they get divorced. Let's see how this works over time. Setting the stage, the early years of marriage. Marriages are most intense in the early days. Early on, husbands and wives share many activities and are open to new experiences together, so bliss results. But bliss doesn't come from avoiding tough issues. Discussing financial matters honestly is a key to bliss, as many newly married couples experience their first serious marital stresses around money issues. How, though, how tough issues early in marriage are handled sets the stage for the years ahead. When there is marital conflict, the intensity of the early phase may create the basis for considerable unhappiness. Early in marriage, the couple must learn to adjust to different perceptions and expectations each person has for the other. Many wives tend to be more concerned than their husbands with keeping close ties to their friends. Research indicates that men and women both recognize and admit when problems occur in their marriage. The couple must also learn to handle confrontation. Indeed, learning effective strategies for resolving conflict is an essential component of a strong marriage, because these strategies provide ways for couples to discuss their problems maturely. Early in marriage, couples tend to have global adoration for their spouse regarding the spouse's qualities. For wives, but not for husbands, more accurate, specific perceptions of what their spouses are really like were associated with more supportive behaviors, feelings of control in the marriage, and decreased risk of divorce. Thus, for women, love grounded in accurate perceptions of a spouse's qualities appears to be stronger than love that is blind to the spouse's true qualities. Still, couples who are happiest in the early stage of their marriages tend to focus on the good aspects, not the annoyances. Nitpicking and nagging do not bode well for long term wedded bliss. As time goes on and stresses increase, marital satisfaction tends to decline. Researchers have shown that for most couples, the primary reason for this drop is having children. But it's not just a matter of having a child. The temperament of the child matters, with fussier babies creating more marital problems. Parenthood also means having substantially less time to devote to the marriage. Most couples are ecstatic over having their first child, a tangible product of their love for each other. But soon the reality of childcare sets in, with 2 a.m. feedings, diaper changing, and the like. Not to mention the long-term financial obligations that will continue at least until the child becomes an adult. Both African American and European American couples report an increase in conflict after the birth of their first child. However, using the birth of a child as an explanation for the drop in marital satisfaction is much too simplistic, because child-free couples also experience a decline in marital satisfaction. It appears that a decline in general marital satisfaction over time is a common developmental phenomenon, even for couples who choose to remain childless. Additionally, couples who have no children as a result of infertility face the stress associated with the inability to have children, which exacerbates existing stresses in the relationship and can lower marital satisfaction. Longitudinal research indicates that disillusionment, as demonstrated by a decline in feeling in love, in demonstrations of affection, and in the feeling that one spouse is responsive, as well as an increase in the feelings of ambivalence is a key predictor of marital dissatisfaction. During the early years of their marriage, many couples may spend significant amounts of time apart. This is especially true of marriages involving individuals in the military. Recent research has focused on the special types of stress these couples face. Spouses that serve in combat areas on active duty assignment who suffer from post traumatic stress disorder are particularly vulnerable, and as they are at greatest risk for other spouse directed aggression. What the non deployed spouse believes turns out to be very important. If the non deployed spouse believes that the deployment will have negative effects on the marriage, then problems are much more likely. In contrast, if the non deployed spouse believes that such challenges make the relationship stronger, then they typically can do so. Research indicates that the effects of deployment may be greater on wives than on husbands. Divorce rates for women service members who are deployed is higher than for their male counterparts. Keeping marriages happy. Although no two marriages are exactly the same, couples must be flexible and adaptable. Couples who have been happily married for many years show an ability to roll with the punches and adapt to changing circumstances in the relationship. For example, a serious problem of one spouse may not be detrimental to the relationship and may even make the bond stronger if the couple uses good stress and conflict reduction strategies. Successful couples also find a way to keep the romance in the relationship, a very important determinant of marital satisfaction over the long run. Sharing religious beliefs and spirituality with one spouse is another good way to help ensure higher quality marriages, and that's especially the case among couples in lower socioeconomic groups. It appears that this effect goes beyond merely doing an activity together, as religion and spirituality may provide a framework for conflict resolution and a way to put one's marriage in a bigger, more significant context. But when you get down to basics, it's how well couples communicate their thoughts, actions, and feelings to each other and show intimacy and support each other, then that largely determines the level of conflict couples experience and, by extension, how happy they are likely to be over the long term. This is especially important regarding high stress areas such as children and work. And this evidence of the importance of good communication skills forms the basis of most marriage education programs we will consider a bit later. So, what are the best ways to stack the deck in favor of a long, happy marriage? Based on research, here are the best. 1. Make time for your relationship. 2. Express your love to your spouse. 3. Be there in times of need. 4. Communicate constructively and positively about problems in the relationship. 5. Be interested in your spouse's life. 6. Confide in your spouse. And 7. Forgive minor offenses and try to understand major ones. 11.3 The Family Cycle, Learning Objectives. 1. What are the common forms of families? 2. Why do people have children? And 3. What is it like to be a parent? What differences are there in different types of parenting? Bob, 32, and Denise, 33, just had their first child, Matthew. After several years of trying, they've heard that having children while in their 30s can have advantages, but Bob and Denise wonder whether people are just saying that to be nice to them. They are also concerned about the financial obligations they are likely to face. When are you going to start a family? Is a question that young couples like Bob and Denise are asked frequently. Most couples want children because they believe they will bring great joy, which they often do. But once the child is born, adults may feel inadequate because children don't come with instructions. Young adults may be surprised when the reality of being totally responsible for another person hits them. Experienced middle-aged parents often smile knowingly to themselves. Frightening as it might be, the birth of a child transforms a couple or a single parent into a family. The most common form of family in Western societies is the nuclear family, consisting only of parents and children. The most common family form around the world is the extended family, in which grandparents and other relatives live with parents and children. Because we have discussed families from the child's perspective in earlier chapters, here we focus on families from the parent's point of view. Deciding whether to have children. One of the biggest decisions couples have to make is whether to have children. This decision appears complicated. You would think that potential parents must weigh many benefits of having a child, such as personal satisfaction, fulfilling personal needs, continuing the family line, and companionship. With the many drawbacks, including expense and lifestyle changes, especially the balance between work and family. But apparently, this is not what most people do. Ridgekin reports that potential parents actually don't think very deliberately or deeply about when to have a child, and that those who are career oriented or like their freedom do not often deliberately postpone parenthood because of those factors. Rather, thoughts about having children seem to just not cross their minds until they are ready to start thinking about having children. Whether the pregnancy is planned or not, and over half of all U.S. pregnancies are unplanned, a couple's first pregnancy is a milestone event in a relationship with both benefits and costs. Having a child raises many important matters for consideration, such as relationships with one's own parents, marital stability, career satisfaction, and financial issues. Parents largely agree that children add affection, improve family ties, and give parents a feeling of immortality and a sense of accomplishment. Most parents willingly sacrifice a great deal for their children and hope that they grow up to be happy and successful. In this way, children bring happiness to their parents. Nevertheless, finances are of great concern to most parents because children are expensive. How expensive? According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, a family who had a child in 2009 would spend the following estimated amounts for food, shelter, and other necessities by the time the child turned 17. In the lowest income bracket, $206,000. In the middle income bracket, $286,000. And in the highest income bracket, $476,000. College expenses would be an additional expense. These costs do not differ significantly between two parents and single parent households, but clearly are a bigger financial burden for single parents. No wonder parents are concerned. For many reasons that include personal choice, financial instability, and infertility, an increasing number of couples are child free. Attitudes towards childless couples have improved since 1970s, with women having more positive views than men. Social attitudes in many countries, Australia, Germany, Great Britain, Ireland, Netherlands, and the United States, are also improving towards child free couples. Couples without children also have some advantages: higher marital satisfaction, more freedom, a higher standard of living. A major international study of older adult couples without children in Australia, Finland, Germany, Japan, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom and the United States revealed highly similar patterns across all countries except Japan. In Japan, the cultural norm of child caring for older adult parents created difficulties for childless older couples. The parental role. Today, couples in the United States typically have fewer children and have their first child later than in the past. The average age at the time of the birth of a woman's first child is about 25. This average age has been increasing steadily since 1970. As a result, of two major trends. Many women postpone children because they are marrying later, they want to establish careers, or they make a choice to delay childbearing. Additionally, the teen birth rate dropped dramatically between the early 1990s and 2005, but has increased since 2006. Being older at the birth of one's first child is advantageous. Older mothers, like Denise in the vignette, are more at ease being parents, spend more time with their babies, and are more affectionate, sensitive, and supportive to them. The age of the father also makes a difference in how he interacts with children. Remember Bob, the 32-year-old first-time father in the vignette? Compared to men who become fathers in their 20s, men like Bob who become fathers in their 30s are generally more invested in their parental role and spend up to 3 times as much time caring for their preschool children as younger fathers do. Father involvement has increased significantly due to, in part, social attitudes that support it. Parenting skills do not come naturally, they must be acquired. Having a child changes all aspects of a couple's lives. As we have seen, children place a great deal of stress on a relationship. Both motherhood and fatherhood require major commitment and cooperation. Parenting is full of rewards, but it also takes a great deal of work. Caring for young children is demanding. It may create disagreements over division of labor, especially if both parents are employed outside the home. Even when mothers are employed outside the home, and more than 70% of women with children under 18 are, they still perform most of the child rearing tasks. Even when men take employment leave, though more likely to share tasks, they still do not spend more time with the children than fathers who do not take leave. In general, parents manage to deal with the many challenges of child rearing reasonably well. They learn how to compromise when necessary and when to apply firm but fair discipline. Given the choice, most parents do not regret the decision to have children. Ethnic diversity in parenting. Ethnic background matters a great deal in terms of family structure and the parent-child relationship. African American husbands are more likely than European American counterparts to help with household chores, and they help regardless of their wives' employment status. Low-income families, African American parents may buffer their children from involvement with drugs and other problems owing to their more conservative views about illegal substance abuse. Overall, most African American parents provide a cohesive, loving environment that often exists within a context of strong religious beliefs. pride in cultural heritage, self-respect, and cooperation with the family. As a result of several generations of oppression, many Native American parents have lost the cultural parenting skills that were traditionally part of their culture. Children were valued, women were considered sacred and honored, and men cared for and provided for their families. Thus, retaining a strong sense of tribalism is an important consideration for Native American families. This helps promote strong ties to parents, siblings, and grandparents. Native American children are viewed as important family members, and tribal members spend great amounts of time with them, imparting the cultural values such as cooperation, sharing, personal integrity, generosity, harmony with nature, and spirituality that differ from European American values, which emphasize competitiveness and individuality. Many Native American parents worry that their children will lose their values if they are overexposed, for example, during college, to European American values. Latino families make up a growing percentage of American families. 22% of all children under 18 in the United States are Latino, and most are at least second generation. Among two-parent families, Mexican American mothers and fathers both tend to adopt similar authoritative behaviors in dealing with their preschool children, but mothers use these behaviors more frequently. Latino families demonstrate two key values: familism and the extended family. Familism refers to the idea that well-being of the family takes precedence over the concerns of individual family members. This value is a defining characteristic of Latino families. For example, Brazilian and Mexican families consider familism a cultural strength. Indeed, familism helps account for the significantly higher trend for Latino college students to live at home. The extended family is also very strong among Latino families and serves as the venue for a wide range of exchanges of goods and services, such as childcare and financial support. Emphasis on traditional values such as familism is especially strong in Latino families from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Like Latinos, Asian Americans value familism and place an even higher value on extended family. Other key values include obtaining good grades in school, maintaining discipline, being concerned about what others think, and conformity. Asian American adolescents report very high feelings of obligation to their families compared with European American adolescents. In general, males enjoy higher status in traditional Asian families. Among recent immigrants, though, women are expanding their role by working outside the home. Research shows that Chinese American parents experience less marital stress during the transition to parenthood than European American couples, perhaps because of clear traditional cultural division of tasks between husbands and wives. Raising multi-ethnic children presents challenges not experienced by parents of same-race children. For example, parents of biracial children report feeling discrimination and that they are targets of prejudicial behavior from others. These parents also worry that their children may be rejected by members of both racial communities. Perhaps this is why parents of multiracial children tend to provide more economic and cultural resources to their children than do parents of single race children. In multi ethnic families, you might think that the parent from the minority group takes primary responsibility for guiding that aspect of the child's ethnic identity. However, a study of children of European mothers and Maori fathers in New Zealand showed that the mothers played a major role in establishing the child's Maori identity. Similarly, European American mothers of biracial children whose fathers were African American tended to raise them as African American in terms of public ethnic identity. As adults, most European American, African American biracial individuals describe themselves as African American. It is clear that ethnic groups vary a great deal in how they approach the issue of parenting and what values are most important. Considered together, there is no one parenting standard that applies equally to all groups. Single parents. Although the overall number of single parent households in the United States has remained at about 9% since 1994, the proportion of births to unwed mothers is an all-time high, now over 40%. The number of single parents, most of whom are women, continues to be high in some ethnic groups. Over 70% of births to African American mothers, over 50% to Latino mothers, and nearly 30% of births to European American mothers are to unmarried women. Among the reasons are simply wanting to have children, failure to use contraception, high divorce rates, the decision to keep children born out of wedlock, and different fertility rates across ethnic groups. Being a single parent raises important questions. Two main questions arise concerning single parents. How are children affected when only one adult is responsible for childcare? And how do single parents meet their own needs for emotional support and intimacy? Many divorced single parents report complex feelings such as frustration, failure, guilt, and a need to be overindulgent. Loneliness can be especially difficult to deal with. Separation anxiety is a common and strong feeling among military parents who are about to be deployed. Feelings of guilt may lead to attempts to make up for the child's lack of a father or mother. Some single parents make the mistake of trying to be peers to their children using inconsistent discipline, or if they are the non-custodial parent, spoiling the child or children with lots of monetary and material goods. Single parents, regardless of gender, face considerable obstacles. Financially, they are usually much less well off than their married counterparts. Having only one source of income puts additional pressure on single parents to provide all the necessities. Integrating the roles of work and parenthood are difficult enough for two people. For the single parent, the hardships are compounded. Financially, single mothers are hardest hit, mainly because women typically are paid less than men, and because single mothers may not be able to afford enough child care to provide the work schedule flexibility needed for high-paying jobs. One particular concern for many divorced single parents is dating. Several common questions asked by single parents involve dating. How do I become available again? How will my children react? How do I cope with my own sexual needs? Single parents often feel insecure about sexuality and how they should behave around their children in terms of having partners stay overnight. When single parenting happens through divorce, dating often begins fairly quickly. We will consider those situations a bit later in this chapter. Alternative forms of parenting. Not all parents raise their own biological children. In fact, roughly one-third of North American couples become step parents or foster or adoptive parents sometime during their lives. To be sure, the parenting issue we have discussed so far are just as important in these situations as when people raise their own biological children. In general, there are few differences among parents who have their own biological children or who become parents in some other way, but there are some unique challenges. A big issue for foster parents, adoptive parents, and step parents is how strongly the child will bond with them. Although infants less than 1 year old will probably bond well, children who are old enough to have formed attachments with their biological parents may have competing loyalties. For example, some stepchildren remain strongly attached to the non custodial parent and actively resist attempts to integrate into the new family. Quote, my real mother wouldn't make me do that. Or they may exhibit behavioral problems. As a result, the dynamics in blended families can best be understood as a complex system. Step parents must often deal with continued visitation by the non custodial parent, which may exacerbate any difficulties. These problems are a major reason that second marriages are at risk for dissolution, as discussed later in the chapter. They are also a major reason why behavioral and emotional problems are more common among stepchildren. Still, many step parents and stepchildren ultimately develop good relationships with each other. Step parents must be sensitive to the relationship between the stepchild and his or her biological non custodial parent. Allowing stepchildren to develop a relationship with the step parent at their own pace also helps. What style of step parenting ultimately develops is influenced by the expectations of the step parent, stepchild, spouse, and non resident parent, but there are several styles that result in positive outcomes. Adoptive parents also contend with attachment to birth parents, but in different ways. Even if they don't remember them, adopted children may wish to locate and meet their birth parents. Wanting to know one's origins is understandable, but such searches can strain the relationships between these children and their adoptive parents, who may interpret these actions as a form of rejection and create difficulties for the adopted person. Families with children adopted from another culture pose unique issues in terms of how to establish and maintain connection with the child's culture of origin. Mothers of for mothers of transracially adopted Chinese and Korean children, becoming connected to the appropriate Asian American community is an important way to accomplish this. Research in the Netherlands found that children adopted from Colombia, Sri Lanka, and Korea into Dutch homes struggled with looking different, and many expressed desires to be white. Research in Sweden also revealed challenges in maintaining the culture from the child's country of origin. Foster parents tend to have the most tenuous relationship with their children because the bond can be broken for any number of reasons having nothing to do with the quality of care being provided. For example, the court may award custody back to the parents, or another couple may legally adopt the child. Dealing with attachment is difficult. Foster parents want to provide secure homes, but they may not have the children long enough to establish continuity. Furthermore, because many children in foster care have been unable to form attachments at all, they are less likely to form ones that will inevitably be broken. Thus, foster parents must be willing to tolerate considerable ambiguity in the relationship and have few expectations about the future. Despite the challenges, the good news is that placement in good foster care does result in the development of attachment between foster parents and children who were placed out of institutional settings. Finally, many gay men and lesbian women also want to be parents. Some have biological children themselves, whereas others are increasingly choosing adoption to foster parenting. Although gay men and lesbian women make good parents, they often experience resistance to their having children. For example, some states in the United States have laws preventing gay and lesbian couples from adopting. Actually, research indicates that children reared by gay and lesbian parents do not experience any more problems than children reared by heterosexual parents and are psychologically healthy as children of heterosexual parents. Substantial evidence exists that children raised by gay and lesbian parents do not develop sexual identity problems or any other problems any more than children raised by heterosexual parents. Children of gay and lesbian parents were no more likely than children of heterosexual parents to identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, or questioning. The evidence is clear that children raised by gay and lesbian parents suffer no additional adverse consequences compared with children raised by heterosexual parents. Children of lesbian couples and heterosexual couples are equally adjusted behaviorally, show equivalent cognitive development, and have similar behaviors in school, and do not show any different rates of use of illegal drugs or delinquent behavior. Some evidence shows that children raised by gay and or lesbian parents may even have some advantages over children raised by heterosexual parents. Children of gay or lesbian parents might be better adjusted than adult children of heterosexual parents in that the adult children of gay and lesbian parents exhibit lower levels of homophobia and lower fear of negative evaluation than do adult children of heterosexual parents. Gay men are often especially concerned about being good and nurturing fathers, and they try hard to raise their children with non sexist, egalitarian attitudes. Evidence shows that gay parents have more egalitarian sharing of child rearing than do fathers of heterosexual households. The idea will not eliminate the controversy, much of which is based on long held beliefs, often religious based, and prejudices. In the United States, the topic of lesbian and gay couples' rights to be parents is likely to continue to play out in political agendas for years to come. Mm. 11.4 Divorce and Remarriage. Learning objectives. 1. Who gets divorced? How does divorce affect parental relationships with children? 2. What are remarriages like? How are they similar to and different from first marriages? Frank and Marilyn, both in their late 40s, thought their marriage would last forever. However, they weren't so lucky and have just been divorced. Although 2 of their children are married, their youngest daughter is still in college. The financial pressures Marilyn feels now that she's on her own are beginning to take their toll. She wonders whether her financial situation is similar to that of other recently divorced women. Despite what Frank and Marilyn pledged on their wedding day, their marriage did not last until death parted them. They dissolved their marriage through divorce. Even though divorce is stressful and difficult, thousands of people each year also choose to try again. Most enter their second or third or fourth marriage with renewed expectations of success. Are these new dreams realistic? As we'll see, it depends on many things. Among the most important is whether children are involved. Divorce. Most couples enter marriage with the idea that their relationship will be permanent. Unfortunately, fewer and fewer couples experience this permanence. Rather than growing together, many couples grow apart. Who gets divorced and why? You or someone you know has experienced divorce. No wonder. Divorce in the United States is very common. Couples who marry in the United States today have about a 50-50 chance of divorce. The odds are even worse if you marry young. For couples between 20 and 24 at the time of marriage, odds are 60% for divorce. But there is good news. The divorce rate has been slowly declining in the United States since it peaked in the late 1970s and early 1980s. In part, that's due to people being more serious about marriage and waiting longer to marry, and in part to a greater social acceptance of cohabitation as an alternative. How about other countries? As you can see in the figure, the divorce rate in nearly every other country is lower than that of the United States. However, divorce rates in nearly every developed country have increased over the past several decades. One factor consistently related to divorce rates in the United States is ethnicity. Of those marriages ending in divorce, African American and Asian American couples tended to be married longer at the time of divorce than European American couples. Ethnically mixed marriages are at greater risk of divorce than ethnically homogeneous ones. Men and women tend to agree on the reasons for divorce. Infidelity is the most commonly reported cause, followed by incompatibility, drinking or drug use, and growing apart. People's specific reasons for divorcing vary with gender, social class, and life course variables. Former husbands and wives are more likely to blame their ex spouses than themselves for the problems that led to divorce. Former husbands and wives claim, however, that women are more likely to have initiated the divorce. Why people divorce has been the focus of much research. Much attention has been devoted to the notion that success or failure depends critically on how couples handle conflict. Although conflict management is important, it has become clear from research in couples therapy that reasons couples split are complex. Gottman and Levinson proposed a bold framework for understanding divorce. They developed two models that predict divorce early, within the first 7 years of marriage, and later, when the first child reaches age 14, with 93% accuracy over the 14-year period of their study. Negative emotions displayed during conflict between the couple predict early divorce but not later divorce. Longitudinal research with European and African American couples over a 16-year period demonstrates that how couples deal with conflict changes over time. In general, European American wives and African American couples use more accommodating and fewer destructive and quiet withdrawal behaviors over time, indicating that they are looking for ways to diffuse conflict and are working through difficult issues more effectively. European American husbands tend to remain consistent in their behaviors, perhaps because they use less withdrawal early in the marriage. These findings explain why the odds of divorce are higher earlier in marriage. Couples married for shorter times are less able to deal effectively with conflict. Gottman's framework and the research it has generated is important because it clearly shows that how couples express emotion is critical to marital success. Couples who divorce early typically do so because of high levels of negative feelings, for example, contempt, criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, experienced as a result of intense marital conflict. But for many couples, such intense conflict is generally absent. Although this makes it easier to stay in a marriage longer, the absence of positive emotions eventually takes its toll and results in later divorce. For a marriage to last, people need to be told that they are loved and that what they do and feel really matters to their partner. But we must be cautious about applying Gottman's model to all married couples. Kim Haldy and Crosby reported that Gottman's variables predicted early divorce did not hold in a sample of lower-income, high-risk couples. However, Cohen and Gottman point out that the sample differences among the various studies means that, as noted in Chapter 1, conclusions about the predictive model must be drawn carefully. Why people divorce is certainly complex. As shown in the figure, lots of factors enter in, such as cultural values, age, presence of children, income, and conflict. The high divorce rate in the United States and the reasons typically cited for getting divorced have sparked new approaches, some of them controversial, designed to help keep couples together. Covenant marriage expands the marriage contract to a lifelong commitment between the partners within a supportive community. This approach is based on the idea that if getting married and getting divorced were grounded in religious and cultural values, and divorce was made more difficult, couples would be more likely to stay together. The couple agrees to participate in mandatory premarital counseling, and that should problems arise later, the grounds for divorce become very limited. The U.S. government is also involved in efforts to strengthen marriage, most notably with the Healthy Marriage Initiative, which was created as part of the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005 and provides $150 million per year for promotion of healthy marriages and fatherhood. These in turn resulted in the National Healthy Marriage Center and the National Center for Marriage Research. Research related to these initiatives has focused on the positive aspects of marriage and on the need to do a better job with marriage education. Will they succeed in helping couples stay married longer? That remains to be seen. The effects of divorce on the couple. Although changes in attitudes toward divorce have eased the social trauma associated with it, divorce still takes a high toll on the psyche of the couple. Research in the United States and Spain shows great similarity in how both partners in a failed marriage feel: deeply disappointed, misunderstood, rejected. Unlike the situation when a spouse dies, divorce often means that one's ex-spouse is present to provide a reminder of the unpleasant aspects of the relationship and, in some cases, feelings of personal failure. As a result, divorced people are typically unhappy in general, at least for a while. The effects of divorce can even be traced to generations not yet born because of the long-term negative consequences on education and parent-child relations in future generations. For divorced people sometimes find the transition difficult. Researchers refer to these problems as, quote, divorce hangover. Divorce hangover reflects divorced partners' inability to let go, develop new friendships, or reorient themselves as single parents. Indeed, ex-spouses who are preoccupied with thoughts of and who have high feelings of hostility toward their former partner have significantly poorer emotional well-being than ex-spouses who are not so preoccupied or who have feelings of friendship towards the former partner. Forgiving the ex-spouse is also important for eventual adjustment after divorce. Both low preoccupation and forgiveness may be indicators that ex-spouses are able to move on with their lives. Divorce in middle age or later life has some special characteristics. If women initiate the divorce, they report self-focused growth and optimism. If they did not initiate the divorce, they tend to ruminate and feel vulnerable. However, in both cases, they report changes in their social networks. Middle-aged and elderly women are at significant disadvantage for remarriage, an especially traumatic situation for women who obtained much of their identity from their roles as wife and mother. Support groups help people adjust. For men, this works best in large groups, and for women, it works best when the group provides emotional support. We must not overlook the financial problems faced by many divorced women. These problems are especially keen for middle-aged divorcees who may have spent years as a homemaker and has few marketable job skills. For her, divorce presents an especially difficult financial hardship, which is intensified if she has children in college and if the father provides little support. Relationships with young children. When it involves children, divorce becomes a very complicated matter. In most countries, mothers tend to obtain custody but do not obtain sufficient financial resources to support the children. This puts an extreme financial burden on divorced mothers whose standard of living is typically reduced. In contrast, divorced fathers pay a psychological price. Although many would like to remain active in their children's lives, few actually do. Child support laws in some states also may limit fathers' contact with the children. One hopeful direction that addresses the usually difficult custody situations following divorce is the Collaborative Divorce Project, based on collaborative law. Collaborative divorce is a voluntary, contractually based alternative dispute resolution process for couples who want to negotiate a resolution of their situation rather than having a ruling imposed upon them by a court or arbitrator. Collaborative divorce is an intervention designed to assist the parents of children 6 years old or younger as they begin the separation divorce process. Early results from the approach are positive. In addition to positive evaluations from both parents, couples benefited in terms of less conflict, greater father involvement, and better outcomes for children than the control group. Attorneys and court records indicate that intervention families were more cooperative and were less likely to need custody evaluations and other costly services. The Collaborative Divorce Project is evidence that programs can be designed and implemented that benefit all members of the family. Divorce and relationships with adult children. We saw in Chapter 5 that young children can be seriously affected by their parents' divorce. But what happens when the parents of an adult child divorce? Are adult children affected too? It certainly looks that way. Young adults whose parents divorce experience a great deal of emotional vulnerability and stress. One young man put it this way: the difficult thing was that it was a time where, you're making the transition from high school to college. Your high school friends are dispersed, they're all over the place. It's normally a very difficult transition, college. New atmosphere, new workload, meeting new people. You've got to start deciding what you want to do. You've got to start getting more independent and so forth. And then at the same time, you find out about a divorce. It's just that much more adjustment you have to make. The effects of experiencing the divorce of one's parents while growing up can be quite long-lasting. College-age students report poorer relations with their parents if their parents are divorced. Parental divorce also affects young adults' view on intimate relationships and marriage, often having negative effects on them. Wallerstein and Lewis report the findings from a 25-year follow-up study of individuals whose parents divorced when they were between 3 and 18 years old. Results show an unexpected gulf between the growing up in intact versus divorced families, as well as the difficulties that children of divorce encounter in achieving love, sexual intimacy, and commitment to marriage and parenthood. These themes are echoed in a study of college students whose parents divorced while they were in college. These students said that experiencing their parents' divorce negatively affected their own intimate relationships and their relationship with their fathers, but it brought them closer to their mothers. Clearly, experiencing a divorce at any age alters lives. Remarriage. The trauma of divorce does not deter people from beginning new relationships, which often lead to another marriage. In the United States, about 25% of adult population has been married more than once. Typically, men and women both wait about 3.5 years to remarry. However, remarriage rates vary somewhat across ethnic groups and education levels. European Americans are more likely to be married 2 or more times compared with other ethnic groups, as do people with lower educational levels. Military veterans are also more likely to be married more than once compared with non-veterans. An interesting emerging trend reflects an important cohort difference. Compared to older generations, younger generations tend to remarry at a lower rate. This may be a reflection of greater social acceptability of cohabitation in the United States, as well as reluctance in younger people to jump back into marriage. In contrast to first marriages, remarriage has few norms or guidelines for couples, especially in how to deal with stepchildren and extended families. The lack of clear role definitions may be a major reason why the divorce rate for remarriages is significantly higher, about 25%, even higher if stepchildren are involved, than for first marriages. Although women are more likely to initiate a divorce, they are less likely to remarry, unless they are poor. However, women in general tend to benefit more from remarriage than do men, particularly if they have children. Although many people believe that divorced individuals should wait before remarrying to avoid the so-called rebound effect, there is no evidence that those who remarry sooner have less success in remarriage than those who wait longer. Adapting to new relationships in remarriage is stressful. For example, partners may have unresolved issues from the previous marriage that may interfere with satisfaction in the new marriage. The effects of remarriage on children is positive, at least for young children who report positive effect on their own intimate relationships as an effect of their parents remarrying happily.